Hello, and thank you for joining us for the next episode in the Peak 10 Gaming Industry Technical Series. This is episode 2B, and we're covering advanced data center concepts today. My name is Bill Cashman. I'm a gaming infrastructure design architect here at Peak 10, and I'll be your host for this and every episode of the series. Peak 10's been providing IT solutions for over a decade now, and for more than half that time, Peak 10's been very closely plugged into the IT gaming industry. During that time, we've realized that while a lot of the needs of the gaming industry as far as IT are concerned are closely aligned with other industries, there are also some very strong uniquities. Those unique requirements include such things as low latency for your customers, understanding how to maintain security and data integrity of the customer data in order to keep the competitive nature of the game as high as possible, leveraging the cloud in an efficient and cost-effective way to improve your infrastructure and streamline processes, keeping your developers focused on their primary task of developing your platform and streamlining that platform, and how do you scale the platform once you have a product in order to maintain costs. Well, at the crux of all these questions, the solution starts with the data center. So this is the photo of the back end of one of the Peak 10 data centers. It's got some interesting shiny parts out there, but really honestly, this is really low-tech stuff. We've got some pipes there. They're moving some fluid around. That's actually a chilled water loop. In the back, we got some really cool looking dishes. Almost makes you feel like you're Luke Skywalker on Hoth looking for the Empire. Great looking dishes back there. And then right in the middle, the big tan container looking system there. That's probably the most key component in the picture, but you'd never know it. That's what they call a chiller system. That chiller system is responsible for the cooling of the data center. Cooling doesn't seem all that exciting, does it? Well, how about this? That's a blade center. That seems pretty exciting to me. I know I'm an IT geek from way back. It's got 16 blades in it. Each of those blades holds 256 gigs of RAM. That's 4 terabytes worth of storage. I could run a whole lot on that. That's a bunch of world servers, a bunch of game servers. Each of those blades, 2 6-core procs. Wow, that's 12 procs per blade, 16 blades in the chassis. Got a whole lot of power there. I see an IT infrastructure waiting to happen. Look at the back end. All kinds of interconnectivity. We got 10 gig Ethernet there. We got some fiber channel in the back. Wow, that's ready to be connected up. When I look at this infrastructure, I see an IT infrastructure waiting to happen. When my facilities manager looks at this, you know what he sees? He sees those 5 vents on top and the 5 vents on bottom. And he sees those like ovens. Those are power supplies. In this particular model, those are 2.4 kilowatts of power each. That's a lot of heat. Why do I say that's a lot of heat? Because when a power supply uses power, it generates heat. The heat comes out. That's why we have raised floors and drop ceilings in the data centers, is to mitigate that heat. For every watt that we power systems, we have to cool that same wattage. So each of these blade centers provides as much heat as 3 standard US ovens. That's a lot of heat. That brings us back to this chiller system. One of the most key components in your data center, but you'd never know it. It's sitting back there looking all unassuming. It's got its big brothers, the generators up top. Everybody talks about generators. Underneath you got the UPSs. Those are all key components to the data center, and they all talk about data center density. So what is data center density? We've got a couple different densities we talk about when we talk about the data center, and the data center density is really going to drive what type of equipment you can use. Power density is probably one of the keys. Power density is really the density of both the power infrastructure as well as the cooling infrastructure. Usually the bottleneck is going to be cooling, because cooling takes a lot of space comparatively to power. So our first data centers we built at Peak 10, less than 100 watts per square foot. They were built 12, 15 years ago. They were built to the current standard, to the standards of the time when they were built. And those standards didn't include things like quad-core, 6-core processors, blade servers. They really were a lot lower power density infrastructures that were being put into the data centers back then. But as technologies such as quad-core, 6-core, 8-core processors Pentium 4s, AMDs, Blade servers, all that's come out. The power density requirements of the data center have drastically increased. So a modern data center is typically built to 150, if not over 200 watts per square foot. And that watt is going to drive what type of equipment you can use. So if a data center doesn't have the wattage density to be able to support your equipment, a lot of times what they'll do is sell you extra space in order to accommodate the cooling for your data center equipment. So what that means is you might have 2 cabinets worth of blades, but you might have to buy 4 cabinets worth of space to be able to support the cooling density for them. The generators and UPSs are also key portions of the infrastructure. They're going to really determine exactly what your uptime characteristics are going to be. Generators being in a redundant fashion, having an N+1 configuration, and the same on the UPSs is going to be key as well. Making sure that during maintenance windows and during your maintenance schedules that the redundancy is still there in case of a disaster. It's really going to increase your uptime capabilities and characteristics. Understanding your data center's maintenance schedules and how those might impact your maintenance windows, and understanding your data center's disaster recovery plan and how do they man and maintain the data center in the event of a local disaster is a key to determining exactly what type of uptime characteristics to expect from your data center. The next major component to look at would be the network. On the screen now you see a map of the United States. And the lines on the map are really designating interconnectivity between major providers in the internet in the United States. As you can see, there are a few key spots where the providers meet up. We've got Atlanta, New York, Chicago, Washington, D.C., Texas, San Francisco. That's where the providers meet. Well, close proximity to the providers is really going to be a key in determining exactly what type of latency characteristics your end users will see. And low latency for a lot of games makes or breaks the competitive nature of the game. So having access to multiple providers and having close proximity access to those providers is key to providing low latency to your customers. Access to multiple providers is also going to determine how well you can guarantee that low latency. If you're in a data center that only has one provider and they're beholden to that one provider, if that provider has issues, the data center is going to have issues. If that provider has latency, the data center is going to have latency. If that provider has downtime, the data center is going to have downtime. A lot of data centers these days will bring in multiple providers and blend those providers together with a route optimization system in order to guarantee high uptime, low latency, and lowest cost for their end users. All this delivered in a redundant network design can show uptimes of approaching or even achieving 100%. And then talking about geographic diversity is something that a lot of gaming companies do. I know years ago it was a standard delivery model where you'd have East Coast, West Coast servers so that you could support your different game user bases in a local proximity fashion to guarantee low latency. Well, as the internet's converged, as larger pipes have gotten put into place, low latency in markets such as Atlanta, Washington, Chicago, Austin, San Francisco, and other cross-country point-of-presence connectivity locations can be low latency even with just an East Coast or West Coast presence. And understanding the support model for that network is also important. Do you have network engineers available 24/7 or are they just there for banker's hours 9/5 Monday through Friday? Security and compliance are probably the most overlooked components in a data center by gaming companies. First and foremost is how is physical access handled? Are you going to be able to get into the data center when you need to? Do you have to call a third party, have them show up and meet you at the data center? Do you have direct access with badges and fingerprints, PIN codes? And then is that access logged? And is that access log available to you and your auditors as you get audited for different audit levels? What network security options are available? Do you need intrusion detection prevention, application level firewalls in order to attain or achieve PCI DSS, GLBA, Sarbanes-Oxley compliance? And are you handling payment transactions? Are you keeping payment information on your systems? If you do, you probably fall under PCI DSS compliance. That's the payment card industry standard for security. If you don't store any information, if you use a third-party transaction vendor, a lot of times you don't fall under PCI compliance. But even knowing what vendors are in your data centers and what levels of PCI compliance are attainable in your data centers can really drive your data center decision. If you have a preferred payment vendor, maybe having a data center with them in it makes a lot of sense. A lot of games are also highlights or targets for DDoS attacks or distributed denial of service attacks or similar attacks. When you have a disgruntled user who didn't win the tournament he was looking for, runs into an excessive amount of grief, a lot of times they'll backlash towards the system. So understanding what mitigation capabilities as far as DDoS and similar attacks are available in the data center can also be a key in your data center decision making. Does your data center provide managed services? Managed services and data centers are converging. Most data centers these days have some sort of managed services, whether it's first party or third party. And in the gaming industry, those managed services can be a key to success. What managed services are going to do is they're going to allow you to focus your developers on their strengths. All too often, I'd talk to a gaming company. I'd say, "What is one of your biggest issues with your IT delivery?" And they'd say, "Well, my developers have to manage the servers, and what I know would take a good system admin, an hour, 30 minutes to do, my developers have to research and they have to figure it out, and it takes them a lot of time. They're not efficient doing it." Leveraging managed services with your data center provider can free up your developers to focus on their primary tasks, which is developing your platform. It can also get you very cost-effective access to broad technical experience. In a data center infrastructure these days, you need virtualization experience. You probably need storage experience, network optimization experience, load balancer experience, Windows and Linux administrative experience, SQL developers, SQL administrators, monitoring experts, network security experts. Once you add up all that headcount, that's a pretty big crew. A lot of studios, developers can't afford or don't want to afford a large IT staff like that. That's where managed services can plug in very easily and give you broad access to technical experience. And then with that technical experience comes a predictable cost. So understanding exactly what your costs are going to be month to month and exactly how your costs scale as your infrastructure scales can be a very strong benefit from leveraging managed services. These managed services can also help you with the PCI DSS audits that I talked about on the previous slide. Do you need security experts? Do you need audit experts? If you've got a managed services provider in your data center, chances are you don't. And then leveraging a data center that has geodiverse systems and geodiverse engineer pools can really assist you, especially in times of disaster. And then finally, a lot of data centers are starting to converge with the cloud. So what is the cloud? Well, we're going to go into advanced data center concepts in the next online seminar, but realistically, the cloud is just a thought process or a delivery method. It's not necessarily a system or a technology as much as it's a way of delivering IT assets. Since the cloud heavily relies on the data center, the cloud and the data center converging is a very understandable phenomenon. So what the cloud needs and what the cloud provides would be such things as reliability, secure access, flexible resources, capability to take the resources and put them where they need to be when they need to be there. Do your game worlds need all the system time during maintenance, or does that need to go to the databases? How does your system scale up and down in the event of a major patch or a major release? The robust network capability and the 365-day support that cloud providers provide can really also keep your customers happy, keep your end users happy, and keep them connected. We're going to go into that a lot more in detail in the next episode, but cloud providers, especially data center cloud providers, can make a decision around your data center provider be very focused. So don't forget about Peak 10. We're a real-time IT strategy. I hope this seminar was useful for you. I hope we gave you a lot of good information that'll help drive your decisions around exactly what you need as far as a data center provider. If you have any further questions, please feel free to email us at realtimestrategy@peak10.com. Meanwhile, stay tuned for the next episode of the Peak 10 Gaming Technical Series. My name is Bill Cashman. I'm signing off. Thank you very much.